And good evening, fellow travellers in space and time, and welcome back to Monday evening, where we get to talk about science fiction and fantasy and stuff. So welcome one and welcome all. We are back. Apologies for missing last week. Because Monday is a bank holiday here in the UK. It's the last one actually until Christmas. So it's kind of an extra Sunday really. So tradition is that we don't do much. And we usually do something as a family on that day anyway. So hence the reason the stream was gone. So apologies for that. And for all of those of an international flavour, i.e. not the UK, because like you probably didn't have a bank holiday, of course, because they're very country specific. I think bank holiday. I don't even know if bank holidays are a thing in other countries, or whether you have kind of national holidays. Obviously, is kind of it. I mean, I don't know why. I need to look it up. I think I ask this question every year. Why are there bank holidays? I have no idea. But in America, they're a bit more sensible. I mean, you have days where specific things happen, whereas ours just seem to be randomly distributed throughout the year for no obviously good reason. It wasn't a bank holiday in Scotland, so is that it's just an English bank holiday, is it? Okay, that's interesting. Do you get an extra one in Scotland then at a different time of year? I'm completely ignorant of this. I shouldn't be really, but there we are. So anyway, there we go. Anyway, good to see you on the stream. So Mad Monksoft is here, Nim Disquin is here, Woody 1974 is here, Adam Arkwright is here. What's the topic? You can't ask that in the first 5 minutes of the stream. That's not allowed. Wintermute is here, Chris Vikey is here, Electro-Raptor is here, Commander O'Connor is here. Oh, the Scottish contingent is out. Excellent. This is very good. And Alan is here as well. So and Feather of the Crow is good. So lovely to. We tap you all aboard. Bank holiday, first Monday in August, I think it's gone. Well, we get that one as well. I think we get, for some stupid reason, we get 2 in August. There's one at the beginning and one at the end. Why are they concentrated in August? I have no idea. Because there's... Oh, no, is that right? No, that's not right. Sorry, I'm getting that totally wrong. We've got one at the end of August. So Scotland gets one in the beginning of August. We get 2 in May. Why do we get 2 in May? I don't know. It's just one of those things. But anyway... Rob's is here as well. Hello, Drew. Good to see you. Commander is... I'm only the planetary overlord. No, I'm a celestial warrior, I think, is the highest rank I have yet to achieve. Although I'm major now. I'm major in Wing Commander, so that's something. Major Drew. It's majors and dying a lot, actually. I think it does make more sense at the start of August. You're quite right. So anyway, so that's that. It's from the CV he admitted for the job of Galactic. I aspire to be Galactic Overlord. I think I'd make an excellent Galactic Overlord, but I haven't got that. Just the Celestial Warrior for the time being. Even the minor Overlord. I think obviously baddies get the best lines. We've talked about baddies before on this stream, haven't we? And to give them their proper name, antagonists or chief antagonists or overlords, or just the generally evil, important, heavy duty bad guy in stories, and what their motivations might be. But they usually have most of the fun up until the last few minutes or the last few pages of the book, when it all goes crashingly wrong for them, because they always make some basic stupid mistake and allow the hero in or the heroine in to deal with the great sordid evil plot. But there we go. I need to get an evil overlord hat pin. I wonder what one of those. Maybe I wonder if I can get an Eye of Sauron or something there like that. That would be really good. Good evening, digressors and wafflers of the world. Pray hearken to the man in black, the waffler in chief indeed. that's just pretty usual. Anyway, so getting distracted on bank holidays again. Wintermute says Zaka FDev posted the request. Oh, I did see that. Yeah. So does this content creators know about the law of the? So I don't know what they're up to. That's quite intriguing, isn't it? I did see a few people mention my name, so thank you very much for that. For those who did, that was very kind. So I've no more information you have as to what they might be planning there. So we'll see. Chris Viking says, in Sweden we have a lot of church holidays that are kind of grandfathered in and we can't be asked to change because they serve a purpose. We did remove the holiday status from Pentecost and transferred it to the National Day, which is the 6th of June. Okay. And America obviously has Independence Day, or as we in the UK like to call it, the day we lost. Traitors Day, I think we've nicknamed it. Independence Day, which kind of makes sense. If it's a significant event in your country's history, I kind of sort of understand, having a day's holiday that day. But I don't know what ours are. The ones in England, particularly, I've got no idea what they are for. So there we go. Somebody asked, "May I have another bank holiday?" That's a really good idea. Maybe we should try that. Promotion and wing commander, captain, major. Can I get any higher than? Can I not get any higher than major? I was captain and now I've become major. So never mind. Have a boo boo says, "Hi Drew, hello there. Good to see you, sir." And Alan is here as well. Zara 031107, hello there. Commander Amadeus Shepherd, a new challenge for you, and I bet you'll fail. I have a new challenge for you, and I bet you'll fail. I dare you not to laugh. Go on then. I'm going almost certainly likely to lose that. Kentish Overlord sounds, that's not bad. The Kentish Overlord, Overlord of Kent. I quite like that. Stefan Juris is here. Good afternoon. Get an empire, but yes, I should. Well, I don't know if I need someone who can custom make hat pins, because it's actually quite hard to get hat pins. They're not very not very common anymore. No offense to Americans, or no, we've got plenty of Americans here as well. Actually, there's normally Glenn, Commander Terra Firma, is here to fly the American flag for us, but he's not doesn't seem to be about at the moment, so hopefully he'll turn up at some point. But yeah, I'd like an Empire pin and obviously I wouldn't wear a Federation one because that's just wrong. Why do they have Columbus Day in the United States when Columbus didn't believe North America existed? I don't know. Lieutenant Colonel should be next if that's in the game. So I don't understand the ranks either. So, but there we go. Commander Amadeus Shepherd is a Yank as well. Well, I mean, we are very eclectic on this stream, to be fair. We have contributors and people from all over the world, and everybody is very welcome. We do take the mickey out of each other's cultures, however, a little bit, because we just do. Okay. It's Labour Day in the US. Okay, that might explain why we may be missing. So, what's Labour Day? Is that you celebrate going to work or something? What's that? I don't know anything about it, honestly. Get a 3D printer and make your own pins. Yeah, but they kind of to be any good, they kind of need to be made out of metal. Can you get metal printers? I don't know. I suppose I could make a plastic one. Commander Shorty's here as well. Stefan Churis, American here. Far away all the jokes and insults you like. Not going to be offended. Most likely agree with you. Well, you see, that's healthy. I think if you can laugh at your own country, then, I mean, and to be fair, in the UK in particular, we have to laugh a lot because our country is in the right state. But what can you do? What can you do? Columbus Day sounds better than the... Columbus Day was achieved by lobbyists. Labour Day is get drunk and have barbecues. It sounds like a pretty fairly standard bank holiday in the UK, actually. These days are quite weird, aren't they? These extra little holidays and things that we have for various reasons that kind of get slowly lost in the mists of time. But there we go. Never mind. I can get behind get drunk and have barbecues. That sounds like an excellent way to spend the day. So that's good. Dear, never mind. Anyway, so fantasy and science fiction, vaguely heading in the direction of topical things. Metal powder laser 3D printers. You might have to sell a lot more books. They sound very expensive. So America wasn't even named after Amerigo Vespucci. We were taught it was for Vespucci in school, but it's not true. Lots of stuff we were taught in school wasn't actually true. Actually, I mean, amazing to think all these people in in education were very badly misled by things. It's funny stuff you actually have to unlearn as an adult, isn't it? When you think, I was taught that in school, it must be right. It turns out to be completely wrong, which is a little bit worrying actually. But there we go. Never mind. So I can't remember if I had finished 2 weeks ago, but I have since, or I had then, I can't remember. I finished my audio of Shadewood 4. So those of you who are hopefully waiting with, I suppose not bated breath, maybe bated ears. What is bated breath anyway? It's another one of those phrases. I don't know what it means. I would use that in a book. She waited with bated breath for the announcement. What is bated? What does that mean? Does it mean... I mean, I know what it means. It's kind of means, you know, we're kind of like, what's going to happen next? But what does bated actually mean? I mean, baited as in, you know, laid a trap? Or, you know, I don't know. There's another one of those phrases which you suddenly think, I don't actually know what I'm talking about. I'm quite happy to use it. Winnie 1974. How much has Maru abused in his fourth book? Does he get? Doesn't it? Well, it means holding your. It does. You mean holding your breath. You're quite right, Alan. But I'm just wondering where baited comes from in that context. I'm just worried now about the Maru question. I'm just trying to think. I don't think he has. To be honest, I think he's okay in book 4, from what I remember. I mean, I think there's a. You know, I can't give much away because obviously spoilers for those who haven't read it. I'm just trying to think. Does he? No, he doesn't. I don't think he gets stabbed or burnt or. Well, there might be a. There's definitely some peril that goes on. But it's probably not as bad as the previous books. Is that fair? Somebody else might chip in if they can remember. So no, I think Maru does well. Okay, yeah, there is the end of the book, which again spoilers. So what can I say? Mad Monksoft has chipped in with an explanation. Bated breath is a phrase first mentioned in Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice. Is it? Okay, so Merchant of Venice. That's actually one of my favourite Shakespeare's, actually. The word bated is an abbreviation of the word abated, okay, meaning to lessen in severity or amount. Bated is rarely used on its own as an adjective or a verb anymore, but it lingers in the English language in the phrase bated breath. There we go. Shakespeare. Commander O'Connor's there as well. Well, there we've learned something already. We're 13 minutes into the street, we've actually learned a thing. Winnie 1974, ask how many times you've made him unconscious. Don't think he gets knocked out. I don't think he gets knocked out in book 4, no. I think he's okay. I think he does overall better in book 4 than perhaps you might be expecting to, so I can't confirm or deny because it's been a little while since I've been playing around with that book. Stefan Curious, I still ban, but he deserves some of that. Well, he's this is the character assassination of Maru. He's a youngish lad, you know. He's naive and he's trying to find his way. Poor fella. The rain has abated. Yes, okay. So my Google skills are unsurpassed. Yeah. I had a completely wrong. We thought it was the anticipation when a fish is about to bite your bait. Baited. Well, yeah, that's kind of the impression you get from baited, isn't it? But it's abated, and it's not spelt bait as in fish bait. It's spelt just bate. It's bated breath. You like tucking it out on the pause on. Winnie says 1974. I still don't like Kiri. Well, she was designed to be a polarizing character. Can I say that? Is that fair? Poor old Kiri as well. Yeah, I think I've said this before with Shadewood. There are obviously 3 main antagonists with Shadewood. There's Kiri, there's Maru, and there's Zoella. And Maru is your kind of route to exploring the technology of the planet and trying to figure out what the hell's going on. That's kind of his purpose, if you like, in the narrative. Kiri is this. What's Kiri's purpose? Well, she's sort of your enlightenment sort of character, I suppose. You know, she starts off very heavily indoctrinated and believes everything she's told, and then slowly starts having doubts. And then Zoella is sort of kind of the other way around. She's sort of trying to be the heart of the story, but you know, it all goes a bit wrong. I still don't like Kiri, and Gigi says she's like Salome. Really? Okay, that's interesting. And Stefan Kurosh, she kind of reminds me of Azula. You know, where's Azula from? I don't know her. Who's Azula? Winnie doesn't like Kiri. Okay. Well, Kiri's supposed to be a polarizing character. You're supposed to kind of sometimes like her and sometimes not. She's supposed to be one of those characters who sort of you kind of like. Yeah, not sure if I like this person or not. Chris Viking had 3 credits on Audible, so I picked up the Shaver books that are already out. I'm about 4.5 hours into the first. Okay, so we can't. Chris will get very cross with me if I give any spoilers away at all, which is quite right. So, the Avatar: The Last Airbender. Okay, so I need to read. I think, to be honest, this is a bad admission on this one. I've only watched the film The Last Endbender. The Last Airbender. So and my kid, because my kids were watching it, and it was a dreadful film. And I kind of was like, oh, this is awful. And I wondered if the books were better than the film. I'm kind of hoping they are in that case. So, and isn't it based on an anime or a cartoon or something? I don't know much about it. We need 1974, and I can't believe what you did to someone. I won't say any more. I think I know what you're talking about. Oh no, Drew. Oh no, I'm so sorry. I think that's a response to the film. Okay, so that was my first introduction to The Last Airbender, was the film. So I'm hopeful that there is a much better interpretation of it somewhere. I need to probably have a look at that. Interesting. She kind of reminds me. So if there's a good character in there, I'd quite be interested. Azula sounds like quite an interesting character. Then I'll see if I can dig that out. I'm gonna make a note of that. There we are. Stick it up. I'm just trying to remember where. I don't even recall the name. So it was an American cartoon Nickelodeon had, which was done in the style of an anime. It's very good. Okay, so I'll need to check that out. Okay, so because I quite like cartoons, so I'll look that in. I must be aware of spoilers for Chris, because he's catching up on. I mean, Shanewood's been out for quite a while, Chris. So I don't quite know what you've been doing, but. I think when did I publish the first one? 2013, or was it? No, it must have been 2015, just after the first Elite Dangerous book. So it's been out a while, but I'm not quite sure when the Audible versions came. I can't remember anymore. But anyway, the whole point of that complete diversion was I finished Shanewood for Audible. It's now being checked and going through the publishing thing, so hopefully we'll be out on Audible for too long. So my focus personally as a writer, science fiction and fantasy wise, is firmly on the fantasy side right now, because I am focusing on Doomdark's Revenge, and I am very, 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 I'm hoping anyway, close to getting to the end. So I have a snagging list. Look, this is how I do it. This is my for those of you who like writing, this is my process. It's basically I read it as a book as best I can, usually on a Kindle. Actually, I find the Kindle works quite well, and I make a snagging list of things that are wrong. Okay. And this is, as you can see, several pages of things that are busted. Here's another one. There's a fourth one, double-sided. So that's 8 pages of busted stuff. And then actually there it goes, it finishes on the end there. So sort of 8.5 pages of things that are wrong in the book. And I've done most of them. I'm looking at here. How many have I got left? I've probably got about 10 or 15 things left to fix in Doomdark's Revenge. So actually, tomorrow morning. Yeah, professional scribble book. That's exactly what it is. Thank you for the follow there, Seth Rogen. I appreciate that. So I literally read my book. What I do is what I could do is I could probably show you actually what I do, because it's dead easy. Here we go. This is, look at that lovely desktop I've got there. A nice thing. No spoilers here, because I'm not going to show you the content, but here is, for your delectation and delight, a work in progress book. Okay, look, here's Doomdark's Revenge. This is actually it. This is Doomdark's Revenge. This is the second draft. So what you do is this is what I do. You do a save as, and you convert it to there we are, a web page. Okay, save it. Just replace the existing file because it doesn't matter. Okay, so there's an HTML version, right? And then now you've got an HTML version. I don't know where this is actually. This backdrop popped up on my screen today, and I thought that looks really nice. I'm just going to keep that one. It looked really. It looks somewhere in the United Kingdom. I would guess this was Scotland or Wales, perhaps. It doesn't look like England to me. Looking at the kind of vegetation at the top, I'm not sure, but it could be anywhere. I mean, who knows? And then what you do is you fire up this fantastic program. If you haven't got a copy of this, go get it. It is free. It's called Calibra, and there's an update comes out like every 30 seconds. Can't be England. There's too much sunshine. It could, I suppose, it could be the Cotswold, but it's no. I mean, there's those hillsides are way too steep for the Cotswold. I would say. I'm guessing, but I don't know. I'm just looking at all I'm doing there is looking at the types of. You see these sort of hedgerows, these completely random hedgerows are very, very UK, and the sort of telegraph poles and things that are kind of, and there's sheep in the field. It could be New Zealand, maybe the Lake or the Peak District. I don't know. It looking at it, it feels UK-ish to me, but of course the picture comes through. It doesn't tell you what it is. But anyway, so maybe it's Wales. It's Wales or Scotland, I would guess. Maybe the Peak District, but it looks too mountainy to me. Anyway, so another distraction. Right, so this program, Calibra. Okay, this is very, very cool. So I'm just going to delete one that's in there. Remove selected books. So what I'm going to do is add a book in, and basically I pick up the Doom Dark's Revenge, in this case HTML file, open that, and it automatically sort of slurps that into its program. And then all I need to do is change the metadata, because for some reason I've got it wrong here. So I basically say the file is going to be called Doom Dark's Revenge, and I can put in the author, which is obviously me. Doom Dark's Revenge there as well. Author sort. I can just is this a series? Well, actually it is. It's the Midnight Chronicles, and this is all metadata that the system can pick up, and it's actually number 2 in that series. Have I got a cover for it? Well, no, the cover is something that we're working on, but I've kind of got a pretend one. There we go, and it'll pick that up. Ta-da! Look at that. I'd say lakes don't really have hedges like that in Scotland. Okay, Gamma, no, that's a good point. And then it's kind of ready to go, right? So I just basically press OK, and then I can convert it to convert book, and it will generate me. EPUB is kind of like a generic format, and up here AZW3 and Mobi are formats that the Amazon Kindle can read. So I can create a Mobi file, press OK. The thing starts. There you go. You can see it down there in a moment. It's done it. That's it. An ebook has been created. And if I click to open it, you can see I have there Doom Dark's Revenge. Where is it? There it goes. Boom, it's just arrived. Doom Dark's Revenge, Dru-ids.mobi. There we are. We've created an ebook live. And if I double click that and use that to open it on the screen, there it is. Oh, I didn't mean to click on that. There you go. So there's actually the ebook. Okay, it starts at the cover, and if I go scroll through it, a lot of this stuff I haven't fixed yet. Author's note. It's an ebook. So what I do is I use that program to create if you like, a draft, or like I suppose a beta release. Although the alpha beta thing is, I think, a little bit overdone. But it's kind of like an alpha or beta type of thing, and I load that onto my Kindle, and I read it on the Kindle as if it's the finished product, the finished ebook. And then, like I say, I go through here and I write notes of all the things that I've got to correct, and then I go back to the Word document and make all the changes. That's basically how I do it. So it's probably not the best solution, but it works for me, and I've always done it that way. And it's kind of, I know where I am. So that's basically how it goes. Birmingham before the concrete rush of the 1800s. I don't think this is time travel, that particular picture. Chris Viking says, well, I didn't know about the Shadewood saga for a good while, then I wasn't sure if it's something I'd be interested in. I was also issues focusing on reading books in the past decade or so. So once I decided to go through a series, I was waiting for the audio books to come out, because I was very much I don't want to wait for the epic conclusion once I'm done with 1, 2 and 3. Actually, I've got one other friend on my Facebook page who basically said, I'm really looking forward to the Shadewood books, Drew. And I said, yeah, that's nice. He said, but I'm not going to buy them. I said, oh, okay. Well, he's not yet, anyway. Oh, right, okay, so when are you going to buy them? I'm only going to buy them once you finish them all. Okay, so why is that then? Thinking he would have the same sort of explanation as Chris has sort of said, but yeah, I basically want to read them in order. If I decide that I like them, I'm going to buy the whole lot and read them in one go, so I don't have to wait, and then those cliffhangery types. He says, no, it's not that. It's not that. Oh, okay, so why aren't you going to buy them until they're finished? And he says, just in case you die. Like, pardon? He said, well, I had one other series that I was really enjoying once, and the author pegged it before he got to the last book. And I said, so in case you do that, I'm not buying them until you finish them. Thanks. So reassuringly, I have finished them. So if you're at all concerned that I won't finish the series because I'm going to peg it, that hasn't happened. I'm relieved to say I'm in good health. And yeah, so he's okay to buy the books and read them. So there we go. It's Howgill in the Yorkshire Dales National Park. It is Cumbria. There we go. Okay, so Yorkshire Dales National Park. They look northern-ish. Is that? I pegged it too far to north in Scotland, but it's jolly nice. So there we go. The E-pub is where I go to E-talk and get E-drunk, says Chris. Very good. I finished Reclamation 2 days ago. Great book. Thank you very much for that, Avalon the Wicked. Appreciate that. That's always nice. That's an old book now, actually. That's one of... I wrote... When did I write? Elite Reclamation must have been written in 2013 and published in 2004. So that's 7 years ago now. That's quite scary. A Mad Monks often use Google image search. I didn't even know you could do that. Feather of the Crow. I can't argue that logic. No, that's right. Robert Jordan, perhaps. Actually, no, Chris, that's a very good point about series, because I am not a fan of book series that get extended just because a book has been popular. Okay, so with and I've got suckered into that in the past, and I felt kind of used a bit by the author. Just saying, okay, so what are you doing here? This is going to be a super series. And it's going to be 5 books long. Great, fantastic. I can look forward to that. Book 1, Book 2, Book 3, Book 4, Book 5, and then there comes the finale. Only to find that, Book 1 was utterly amazing. Okay, it's like, Book 1 was just awesome. Right, into Book 2. Book 2 was pretty darn good. Okay, Book 3 was like, this really seems to be slowing down now. Nothing's really happening. And Book 4 was the same, but then Book 5, it turned out, wasn't the end of the series. There's going to be another 5 books. It's like, really? And it's like, is this ever going to end? And I just lost interest. And I think that's a real shame, because if I'd rather have 5 really, really good books than 10 that are sort of strung out. And I feel that authors only do that, maybe for the money, I don't know. So Shadewood was actually going to be 5 books originally. I had kind of planned it as 5. And when I got about, I think I got most of the way through Book 2, and I thought, it's not going to be 5 books. I haven't got enough material here to make it 5 books. And I could have expanded it a bit, but it would have slowed down a lot in its delivery. And I said, no, it's a 4 book. Yeah, all 4 books is all I need. And 4 books is enough, to be honest, to write a pretty decent saga, shall we say. I mean, 3 books should be enough, really. But I had a lot of stuff I wanted to do. So there we go. Brandon Sanson could take over any series of Drew pegs it. The guy's a machine, yeah. I'm not going to peg it, all right? Just stop with that whole train of thought. I wrote 2, didn't I? Yes, in the Elite, yes. So there were 2 Elite Dangerous books. Reclamation and Premonition, yeah. 2014 and 2017. Long time ago for both of them, actually, really. Kind of in my writing thing. I've done so much stuff since. I struggle to remember what they were about. But there we go. Yeah, I love the Wheel of Time series at first, but then after book 5, I think it was 300 pages of nothing happening, people travelling. Yeah, so I don't like that. There's got to be a reason. There's some, each book, I feel, in a series should be a self-contained novel. Something significant should happen in the book that makes the book justify itself. It shouldn't just be this is what happens between book 2 and book 4. It's called book 3. something significant should happen. In an ideal world, and I think I managed to achieve this with Shadewood, if you accidentally picked up I can't even talk. If you accidentally picked up book 3 of Shadewood and started reading it, you should be kind of able to get into it and get to the end of it and go, actually, there was a story there that kind of worked on its own, and maybe I should go now and read the others. And you would hopefully have enjoyed it rather than just, what the hell's this all about? So I don't know. There we go. You cut it down to 4 when you realised you would not finish 5 before you... Oh, Glenn's here. Hello, Glenn. You cut it down to 4 when you realised you would not finish 5. No, I did not. I am not going to kick the bucket. I am perfectly okay. Thank you very much. So that Clan of the Cave Bear, Valley of Horses and Mountain Hunters. You see, that sort of stuff I think is a shame. I don't know whether that's because maybe the first book is really successful and then they have to go on to make it into a series, which is maybe not what they originally planned, or they just their publisher just says just pad it, make more books. I don't know. We're just future planning proofing your streams, says Willie. You've really got it in for me and Paul Maru, haven't you? I didn't realise I'd been so mean to the poor guy. Ran out of different ways to abuse Maru, so 4 books was... That hashtag is going to come back, isn't it? Justice for Maru. Dear, poor old Maru. The funny thing is, it's those characters, because I've sort of finished that series, those characters are now... In my head, their story has been told, and of course, people who are now reading those books are coming back and going, "Oh, what about this? And what about that?" and stuff. So I've kind of put that in my done pile now, from my perspective. And I don't personally. I don't know whether other writers justice for Maru. There was a bit of a Twitter thing about that a few weeks ago. That was quite funny. I don't tend to go back and read my own stuff. I don't know if other writers do that. Once I've written it, I will obviously proofread it and I'll read it, make sure it's what I want it to be. But once it's sort of a book, once it becomes a thing, I don't know where my copy of Shadewood is. It's probably on the shelf. Once I've done it, I kind of leave it. The next project is in my head. For example, I haven't read my Elite books in over 5 years, pretty much since they were published. Shadewood, I can still remember the plot reasonably well because I've just finished the audiobooks, but I won't read them again for years now because I'm concentrating on something else. My creative energy, if you like, in my head, my creative energy gets sapped a bit by getting stuck in something else. I like reading somebody else's novels, so I will, I'll be reading other bits and pieces, but my own stuff, I don't try and go back to it because otherwise I tend to find it sort of pollutes the present, if that makes sense. Glenn says, you talked about maybe a novella about the mobilists. Any plans on? Yeah, so actually my next period of plans, this is what I'm for my fantasy fans, and I know there's a few of those out there with basically saying, what the hell's happened to Doom Dark Revenge? Why isn't it out yet? I can only apologise because COVID and everything connected to it really threw a complete loop in my plans. I was planning in 2018 to take up writing 100% full time, but that required a few other things to happen, which COVID completely trashed. My entire plan came apart within a couple of weeks of COVID sort of arriving, and the kind of coping with COVID and everything else that went with it has sort of, I've had to reappraise a few bits and pieces, and so I am still writing, but nowhere near at the speed I hoped to be doing. So Doom Dark's Revenge has been the one that's really been impacted by that. But I'm literally nearly at the end of Doom Dark's Revenge now, and I want to get that out because it's way supposed to come out last year. That was the original plan, and I've still got I think the thing on I'm updating my website at the moment because I think my website said coming out 2020. It's like, oops. And it's now like September 2021, so it's very late, and I do apologise to readers on Doom Dark, but it's coming, and I will not get distracted by anything else much. It's a bit of an empty promise for me, really, isn't it? Until I get that novel finished. Okay. And yes, so I have been mucking about doing other stuff. It's the summer holidays and mucking about with kids and things. All that stuff happens as well, doesn't it? And I've had some work opportunities that have come my way, which would be daft to turn down. So you've got to juggle all these things, and I'm way too busy, and that I probably always will be. That's just me. But Doom Dark's Revenge is absolutely the next thing. I will finish that book before I embark on any depth of any other project. But okay, to get back to Glenn's point. I've got lots of ideas. So, what I did with Shadewood is I had to build an entire. God, it sounds a bit grand, but I had to build an entire universe. So not forget Celestial Warrior and Major Dru. I am the creator. So, in order to make Shadewood work, I did world building for the planet and the people and the customs and the characters and all that kind of stuff, normal stuff that authors do. But I kind of wanted it to be set in a period of history. Not here. It's the future, but it's a timeline, all those kind of things. So I built a timeline, and I've figured out where the Shadewood thing came from and why we're there and all that kind of good stuff. And that meant effectively I created my own universe, which sounds very grand. Obviously, I didn't create a universe; it's just in my head and in a Word document. But basically, what I've done is I've done the work to substantiate a fictional universe. It's nowhere near the depth of something like Star Trek or Star Wars or anything like that, but it's that sort of thing. Okay, so there are planets out there, there's some history that's happened, there are things that have gone on in this realm, and it's set in the future of our reality. Okay, so a few thousand years on from where we are now, and that's all been worked out. And having done all that work, when I got to the end of the Shadewood saga, I thought to myself, well, I can just that's it. Just leave it in the archive. Or I could think, well, there's lots of other stories to tell in this universe. Maybe I could just reuse this universe for something. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm going back to science fiction. And Shadewood actually is technically science fiction, but it's in a fantasy style, and that just gets you into the genre mess. So Shadewood is mostly, it's science fiction in the sense that it's plausibly accurate. But it's kind of fantasy in the sense it tends to deal with swords and sorcery type feel. Okay, so it's one of those kind of not very easy to categorise books, which cause me all sorts of grief. But I've written what I want to write. But it's more of a fantasy style than it is a science fiction style. And I wanted to go back to a bit more sort of space pew pew with the next series. So the next 4 books will be set in the Shadewood universe. Concurrent with events that you've already read in the Shadewood saga, but in a technically much more advanced civilization. So it's going to be, spaceships and planetary landings and, flying around systems and doing spaceshipy stuff. Okay, so it's going to be a much more of a space opera than Shadewood was, but it's set in the Shadewood universe, if that makes sense. So that's what the next series of 4 books is going to be about. So that'll probably take me another 8 years to write all that, but that's the plan. In amidst those, I've had an idea for the ship. So the ship that's in the Shadewood saga is called the Mobilus. So minor spoilers, there's a ship called the Mobilus, which does some stuff. Okay, and it has a big role to play in the Shadewood saga. But the Shadewood saga is, if you like, the last story of that ship, and all the previous stories of that ship haven't been told. So I've got the kind of idea of doing some the previous voyages of the Mobilus kind of story. That might just be a single book, but we'll see. I'd quite like to do that. And then there's the origin story of the Shadewood universe. How do we start out to get into the situation we end up to in these later books? So there's like a prequel series that I might do as well. So that's probably another 4 books or maybe 3 books. I don't really know. And at my current rate of progress, that's probably at least another 15 years work, by which time I will be an old man. So we'll see. Come on, Drew. It's because you started playing No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky has been a lovely diversion, I have to say. You don't want to go and reread your stuff as a simple read just for fun to see if your book was a fun read. I don't know. Because I know exactly what's going to happen. I don't really get much out of reading my own books because I know what's happening. I know exactly what's coming up next. And I don't very often reread books. There are some absolute favourites that I do reread. For example, every Christmas I read A Christmas Carol by Chickens. Christmas Carol by Dickens. Sorry. A Dickens Carol by Chickens. No, Yeah, that's a bit of a tradition. I like that, and there's a few books from my childhood that I read because they just give me warm, fluffy feelings because I associate them with being a kid. But no, generally I don't reread books because there's so many more books to read that it seems a bit of a waste of time. So that's kind of it. You can take a man out of OD, but you can't take ED out of a man. So yeah, there's always another story in ED. Dahl's chickens, yes, exactly right. Stefan says, so Shadewood was the part of humanity that drew the short story while the rest of humanity was having fun because of hate ships. Kind of. So basically the premise behind Shadewood is that we had to abandon the Earth for reasons which will be explained in the prequel series when I get to it. Multiple places were aimed as colony destinations, and the Shadewood world that you've come across is one of them. Okay, but there were others. And on the Shadewood world, technology regressed for about 2,000 years until it kind of now, as the Shadewood started opening, it's beginning to pull itself back out of the Dark Ages. The question being, okay, so with 2,000 years of technological advancement potentially from the point at which we left those other colony ships, what happened? That's the new series. So there aren't any spoilers on that one because I haven't written it yet. I drew the short straw. Do I have the next Maru lined up for the next book? Justice Maru's replacement. Well, I have got a cast of characters beginning to evolve. Okay, so they're not set in stone yet, but I have got a cast of characters for the next things. Because I generally start with the characters because I find that the most interesting thing. That's basically where I start from, and then I sort of work out the plot from there. So. Just to be sure to update your author portrait as you do the prequel so you can be the backwards aging man. That's a good idea, actually. No idea how many times I've read. So Lord of the Rings is a good exception. I will reread Lord of the Rings every so often just because I just enjoy that story immensely. I'm reading Harry Potter series. See, I liked Harry Potter. I liked the first 3 books. I thought they were quite elegantly written and quite nicely done. And when it got into the big epic-y things, I lost interest. And even the films, it's just too long. Not enough happening, not enough quick. I thought the first 3 books were really nicely paced. And then it just got a bit too long-winded for me. So anyways, what's tonight's topic? It's 43 minutes into the stream, but we haven't got to the topic. Reading the same books is like meeting old friends. Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, I don't do it very often, but I do it sometimes. So I think that's good. Random thing, or Kia, I don't know how you pronounce it. Kiapong01. Good evening. Good evening, Kiapong01. Pleasure to meet you. Random thing, I was just looking at Calibra on their website and just saw that COVID Goyle, so I guess you've been helped and hindered by COVID. Very good. Wintermute has a question. What is tonight's topic? Okay, so tonight's topic. Let's segue to tonight's topic. You've done your usual good self in terms of keeping me distracted from things. I entirely blame all of you. It's no natural tendency on my part to waffle on. Definitely not. I can't remember what the record is. I think I don't think the record can be beaten because I think the record is the entire stream. I'm pretty sure we managed that once, and I never actually got the topic at all. But there we go. Right. So the topic of this evening, the topic of this evening was, or is, or shall be in a moment. Hopefully, if I get to it. Look, squirrel. Now stop it. Look, squirrel. Oddly enough, no, I'm not going to get it. To boldly go where no waffle has gone before. It was a good night, that was, yes. For the whole stream one time we did. Tonight's topic was supposed to be, so I was trying to bridge the sort of fantasy and sci-fi realms a little bit with this one. Is that how, obviously in fantasy novels we have magic. Okay, we've discussed magic on the stream multiple times in terms of what you can and can't do with magic and various other bits and pieces. But my topic for this evening was sort of a sideways look at magic in terms of science fiction as well. To sort of say, how much magic can we actually do nowadays, and how much magic will we be able to do in the future? So I'm kind of thinking like things like For example, I mean, Harry Potter's quite a good example. In Harry Potter, they use magic to do many of the sort of humdrum things that we, in the Muggle world, have to kind of do manually. I'm thinking of, there's magic to wash dishes, isn't there? You see that a couple of times, and there's there's the owls. Which I don't really understand, the owls in Harry Potter, because they can apparate, right? Everybody, once you pass your apparition exam, which is, I suppose, sort of analogous to the driving test, isn't it? You can just apparate any way you like. So why do you need an owl? What's the point of sending an owl to somebody? Which is obviously, I assume, a slightly slower method of transferring information than actually going there in person. So one would imagine that the owls would be out of business fairly quickly. So I don't quite understand the owls in Harry Potter. I think they're a lovely touch. I like the owls, but they don't really make a lot of sense. So in Harry Potter, you have apparition as a kind of replacement for driving, I think, the owls are sort of, I don't know, like letters. It's the postal service, isn't it? But if you think about things that magic can do, particularly historically, things like moving pictures. Okay, so if you'd written a fantasy magical novel a few hundred years ago, flying through the air, like witches on broomsticks, would have been regarded as a complete flight of fancy. But of course, now we can all do that on airplanes. So it's not quite the same as using a broomstick, but we can at least fly. And then, traveling, sending messages, through the mysterious ether. We can do that with radio, and we'd be able to do things like that. So a lot of the stuff that, magic was sort of there for, has kind of been replaced with technology over the years. Some fantasy novels kind of ignore this fact. Harry Potter, I always found quite intriguing that it sort of tried to embrace it. I say magic was happening alongside the Muggle world. So there was always like an equivalent to the Muggle world, they enchant. It's like the car, the Ford Anglia. They enchant the car to do. It's like an experiment. What happens if we add some magic to this technological thing? So that's quite good. Asio Doomdark is finished. Yes, I like what you're thinking. That's why we have wives. The owls are not what they seem according to Twin Peaks, says Zandhond. I have to explain that one. When it comes to magic systems, I've recently reading the Mistborn trilogy, and that's really got a nice magic system where the costs and powers are fairly clearly out. So I like that sort of thing, Hewan. I like that sort of thing where magic has almost like a sort of charge deplete sort of cycle to it. I always quite liked it I didn't agree necessarily with the mechanics, but I quite liked it in Dungeons and Dragons, for example. If you've ever played that as an RPG, when your magic user casts a spell, he's lost it to his consciousness. He has to relearn it over several things. So if you, classic one I think is a magic missile. I can't remember what a magic missile does. It's a sort of offensive weapon in Dungeons and Dragons. But if you want to cast a magic missile, you've memorized this spell, and then the act of casting it sort of erases your memory, and you have to re-study it. So you can't reuse the spell straight away. So there's like there's a bit of it's obviously part of the Dungeons and Dragons gaming, but it's there's a cost and an opportunity and a tactical shall we use this spell now kind of consideration going on. Whereas in Harry Potter, you seem to be able to cast spells, pretty much whenever you want. Expelliarmus and Accio this and what's the other? What's the offensive spell? There's the levitation one. Wingardium Leviosa. That one. So that is there doesn't seem to be a direct cost to the characters in casting those spells. The only thing you do get, and my son and I are always laughing about this, is when and this isn't just Harry Potter, but there is when Voldemort and Harry Potter are sort of facing off with each other, and they point their wands at each other, and magic stuff comes out of their wands, and then those two magic plumes sort of meet in the middle, and they sort of stop each other in some weird sort of magical way, and then you see Harry Potter and Voldemort holding onto their wands as if they're sort of straining at them like this. There's sort of vibrations in their hands, and just really, really, really hold onto your wand because there's this energy feedback thing or something. What the hell's going on there? It's like there's some real physical requirement. Yeah, you have to sort of, I don't know, hold your wand very tight and vibrate a lot. It's like, it's energy, surely. Why is it? What's it doing? Is there some turbulence? Is it trying to pull your wand out of your hand or something? What's happening? So there are some strange magical forces, and you see that in quite a lot of where magical wand recoil. So, yeah, but you see this in quite a lot of magic stuff. Is if somebody's casting a spell and you block it with your hand, there's this sort of pseudo-physical struggle, isn't there? Where you have, and you see it in Star Wars as well, with the sort of force lightning and pushing against each other like this, as if magic has some sort of strange force associated with it that you have to kind of wrestle with in a physical sense. And I suppose it's a relatively cheap way. Apologies for the plane that's flying over my house. It's a relatively cheap way, in film at least, of showing that the character is struggling to implement the spell, I suppose. Sounds like I'm getting bombed. What that is. So that sort of thing. Whereas, but most of the rest of the time, it's like they can in Harry Potter they can cast spells without any obvious cost. They don't seem to be depleting an energy source of any kind. And when magic is written into books with, I don't know what it was. It wasn't. I don't think it was a Merlin engine. We do have Spitfires flying. You've probably heard one in the past. I don't know what that probably was a helicopter, I think. We do occasionally have Spitfires flying over my house, but that wasn't a Merlin engine, I don't think. It was. I think it was a helicopter, but I can't identify it beyond that. It's the Luftwaffe flying over. Not now, no. About 70 years ago, this would have been quite a dangerous place to have been. But not now, no, we're good. Wand recoil, yes. What about the wizard fight in Lord of the Rings? I don't see physical forces might be. Lord of the Rings. See, the one thing I've always liked about Lord of the Rings is it's much more subtle. You don't often see Gandalf, manifesting magic much at all. I mean, he does subtle things. He puts the crystal in his staff and it lights up, and he does aim a beam of light at the Nazgul at one point, but most of the time he's not very wizardy, actually, in a sense of demonstrating magic is Gandalf. There is that wizard fight. Now I don't know, that's much more I think confined to the films though, isn't it, than it is to the book. I don't recall, I'd have to go and read Lord of the Rings again. I don't recall the sort of wizard fight between Gandalf and Saruman being actually kind of described in the book at all, as far as I recall. I remember, I mean, obviously Gandalf does get imprisoned at Orthanc, but I don't think there's is there a fight in the book between Gandalf and Saruman? I can't remember. But in the film, there's obviously a bit of a wizard, battle. It looks a bit like wizard chess, isn't it? Saruman obviously wins that particular round. So I didn't think it was in the book. It's quite an interesting scene, and it sort of shows that they can throw force using magic, because they'll gesture with their sword, not their sword, with their staff, and it's like so it would seem like getting hit by the staff physically, even though you weren't physically hit. The D&D take on Gandalf I heard was that he was a level 2 wizard and a level 12 fighter. Okay, there wasn't a fight in the book. I mean, they talk about it, I think, but not an actual scene. Yeah, so I think Gandalf just makes a throwaway line. A friendship with Saruman is not easily overturned or something like that. So that sort of thing. But a magic system where there's some cost to. I mean, Lord of the Rings actually alludes to it a couple of times when Gandalf is in the. When they're trying to cross the Misty Mountains before they go into Moria, and Gandalf has to help light a fire or something. And he basically says something along the lines, well, I've written Gandalf was here in signs that can be read from one side of the Misty Mountains to the other. So he's aware that using magic is going to advertise his position, which he doesn't really want to do, but he has no choice. So there's a cost to magic. And I like that. I think that's an important part. Magic shouldn't just be a kind of like we could just wave a wand and boom. There should be a disadvantage to using magic, i.e. it alerts somebody to your position, or it costs you some store of energy or something like that. Those sort of things I think are good bits of magical design if you're going to put those into fantasy novels. I like a little bit of, actually we could use magic here, but let's try not to, because if we do we won't be able to use it later on, or it's going to give away our position, which is a really bad tactical thing to do at this stage, because actually we're trying to be stealthy. That is a good piece of magic to me. But a lot of the things that they do with magic in classic fantasy novels, going back to the point, is kind of the stuff we can do now. I mean, for example, if you want to light a fire in the wilderness, nowadays we can take a fire lighter and a couple of paraffin cubes, and then we can beat the dwarfs at their own game. So that sort of thing. If we, our technology is way better than a flying dragon. I mean, a flying dragon would be a very impressive thing to see, a fire-breathing dragon. But I wouldn't put a squadron of flying dragons up against the American Air Force, for example. I think that would be a very, very one-sided fight. So again, I think our technology would be overwhelming. And I was discussing this with my son, because we went to see The War of the Worlds not long ago. And it was he basically came out and said that was really, really epic. Really, really good. And but he says the only problem is, of course, now if the Martians came today, we'd totally kick their butts, because just send in the Air Force and missile them to oblivion. There'd be no messing around. Okay, we might lose a few people to the heat ray, but to be honest, we can engage those targets from out of visual range now, so the Martians wouldn't have a chance. We can replace a lot of the magical stuff with the technology that we have today has kind of moved on. And then when you start thinking of magical stuff like so dragons, no use against the Air Force. We totally beat the dragons. Massive armies of things. Technology would Black Riders versus an F-22 Raptor. Yeah, exactly. So you see. Now, can magic bring us one back on this? Are there things that magicians could do? I mean, in certain cases, magicians can just wish you out of existence, okay, or hold you immobile in space. Some some witches and warlocks have been able to do things like that. Or totally nullify the effect of weapons, because of course magic can of course do anything. So putting it up against technology might not necessarily work. They just give the Martians better shields now. So it's interesting when you see different versions of War of the Worlds, is that the Martian technology always has to be one better than anything that we've got, which is kind of the point of the story. I know I'm being a bit facetious, mixedly. Gandalf used his thumb to light his pipe, so yeah. Tolkien once suggested that Gandalf was his fantasy manifestation of Jesus Christ, and that his magic was the ability to instill strength in the hearts of good men. Well, that's quite nice. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's quite nice. We could just put the ring on the tip of a cruise missile and fly it into Mount Doom. So I've had lots of fun with the whole. Why didn't they just give the ring to the eagles? fly across to Mount Doom and drop it in. That's been lampooned on the internet quite a few times. Thanks for that comment, Juster. I wasn't sure about that one, but and Wintermute, Granny Weatherwax in the Discworld books. See, oddly enough, the Discworld books, they're obviously funny. They're humorous, but actually there was this, because this, he was a bit of a genius. Was Perry Pratchett, but his humour is often better thought through than some actual serious works. So that's I think that's quite interesting, that the way he's done that sort of stuff. But having that cost to using magic, I think is actually quite important. I think it adds something to your novel if your magic is thought through and has a cost to it, and has lots of limitations. But yeah, so the other thing is any kind of communication technology. So for example, again, go back to Lord of the Rings, the Palantirs, or how you pronounce it, Palantirs, and sort of remote communication technology. I mean, Zoom, right? Teams, Skype. We've done it. It's there. Now, when Lord of the Rings was written, the idea of instant visual communication. I mean, I suppose they had telephones, but the idea of instant visual communication would have seemed fantasy. Whereas now, I mean, what are we doing tonight? I'm transmitting a moving image across the internet, so hundreds of people can watch it if they haven't got anything better to do. The things that we can do now with technology are magical. And not that long ago, to be honest. I mean, I remember as a kid in school, I think it must have been the early 80s, actually, thinking about it. We had a book, we had a physics textbook, I think it was a physics textbook. And right at the back, after all the boring stuff that you had to learn, right at the back was a page, where technology is going and stuff like that. And on the very last page, there was a photo of I think a young lady basically holding what was effectively a portable TV with an aerial sticking out of it and having a conversation with somebody on the screen. And this was in probably the mid 80s, and I remember looking at it about the age of 13, 14, looking at that and thinking, wow, if we ever do something like that, I mean, that the future will be here. Will they do that in my lifespan? Little did I know. And now, your average mobile phone, we take these things entirely for granted now, but the things that they can do, magical by the definition of the previous generation. I think fantasy novels have to work quite hard to go, well, why don't they just use mobile phones instead of owls? Because it'd be an awful lot quicker. And there's this sort of, when you read Harry Potter, there's a sort of, there's a sort of slightly smug superiority about the magic users. Even the nice ones are basically saying, well, thank God we aren't muggles, right? Because who'd want to be a muggle? And actually, you look at all the things that they've got going on in their world. And yes, they could do some interesting things like, fit buildings in spaces where there aren't any building. And flying cars, and that's got to be a reason to be a wizard, isn't it? To have a flying car. But an awful lot of their stuff, like there's much better ways to achieve that, not using magic, than there are actually using magic. So all those sort of things. Danny Vega just subscribed with tier 1. Thank you very much for the subscribe. I appreciate that. I could not just give it to the Eagles because Sauron's got Patriot missiles. So there's going to be a technological version of Lord of the Rings where we have to fight with modern technology. And Sauron can take control of the Palantir. Yes, he can. So that's like sort of firing up Zoom, trying to make a call to somebody, and the only person you can call is Sauron. It's like, oh damn, Sauron again. Could have given Aragorn Stinger missiles. Yeah, that would have been useful for So how would technology fare against the Nazgul? So all that sort of things. Commander Short says, we had a power cut today, even the phone signal went, and I realised how stranded I was. So yes, take away our technology and we're in serious trouble, aren't we? Yeah, that's an interesting topic. Even sci-fi has to work hard to describe things that are futuristic tech. We have a tendency to either something too much like our current tech or a bit better and get it. That is very, very true. And you only have to look at relatively recent sci-fi to go, well, that looks ridiculous now. Yeah. King Jong is using the line again. The only people you can speak to currently are. The other thing I was thinking of is communication using magical talismans, mobile phones. I mean, to somebody in the 1800s, this would be a magical talisman. Well, how the hell does that work? It's just a box with a screen on it, and it lights up. How did that work? Generating artificial light and all those things. It's all very magical. So, and there's that classic thing from Arthur C. Clarke. I think I'm right in saying it's Arthur C. Clarke. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And we have this So if we're presented with, how far back would you have to go for this to be literally magical? I mean, I think 100 years is 100 years enough? Probably not quite enough. 100 years, because I'm thinking back, 1921. If you took technology from today back to 1921, they would be probably quite flabbergasted by it, but it wouldn't be outside of their ability to comprehend. Whereas I think if you went back 300 years with today's technology, you'd probably be burnt at the stake or something, wouldn't you, for being a witch? How do you know she's a witch? Oh, she looks like one. You don't have to go that far back in history for our modern technology to be utterly inaccessible to perfectly reasonably normal people of the era. If you went back to, I don't know, 17, what would that be? 300 years back from now is 1721. So what's going on? What was going on in 1721? Let's just have a quick look. What big events of the year 1721? So what was happening? Okay, so so you've still got the British and the Spanish and the Portuguese are fighting each other in the Atlantic, basically. That seems to be the biggest events of 1721. Take today's technology back to then, it would be magic. And Alan's quite right. So technology changed a little between 1000 and 1500 compared with 1900. So there's been a massive expansion. Now if somebody from the future, genuinely from the future, came back from, let's say, I don't know, 200 years in the future to now, the things that they would be able to do with their technology would probably be to us on a different level of, it would seem to be magic to us. We would have no, I would imagine, probably. It would be difficult for us to explain how it worked in any meaningful way. Now, we are a more technologically savvy era now than we ever have been. In some ways, use this quite advisedly, in some ways far less credulous than we would have been in the past. But you only have to look on social media and things to see there's an awful lot of very, very credible people, and I mean credible, not in a complimentary way. To all sorts of misinformation. The tendency for us to want to believe things is quite strong. So that's quite interesting. So from a fantasy novel perspective, you can sort of just rely on the old things, and I'm thinking of things like when you cast a spell, stuff happens. You can materialize objects out of nothing. Now we can't do that at the moment, so that's quite safe. You can destroy objects for no other thing. You can communicate at distance. You can summon visions, those kind of things. You can cast beams of light through the air, kind of like laser beams and stuff, but all that sort of stuff. Those sort of uses of magic can sometimes be supplanted by technology and sometimes can't. I think that's that's interesting, and I don't know if fantasy novels really, a lot of the time, take much notice of that. I mean, for example, in Doomdarks, I haven't. We've spent a little bit of time thinking about how the magic might work and where the magic might have come from. We do have a rationale for it in the book, not a hugely complicated one. And I don't know. I don't know enough other fantasy authors to know if they even bother worrying about it. So how does your magic system work in your book? What do you mean? Just cast spells and do stuff, whatever the plot requires. I don't know. Sometimes it's got a lot more a deep thought to it than other times. I suppose I come to these things mostly as a sort of a fairly hard science fiction author, and I like things to have some logic in the way they work. And that's how I tend to view them. That may not be the case. A 3D printer can materialise things. I suppose that's very true, Commander Buffer said. That's a good point. We put in a pattern for something, and the machine goes and builds it. Okay, it's not instantaneous, but that technology is only going to improve. So I can imagine a 3D printer, or some sort of analogus of whatever a 3D printer ultimately becomes, from 200 years in the future, would seem to us like magic materialization of an object. I mean, maybe the replicator from Star Trek Next Generation will just be a given. That would seem like magic to us today. Sending cat memes straight back into people's brains. And telepathy, we've talked about a technological capability of telepathy. That's not difficult for us to envision nowadays. The ability to mind read and things like that. So those sort of, I suppose, magical abilities are potentially within our grasp as well. Commander Short, you're quite right. It's quite slow today, but everything speeds up, doesn't it? And everything gets more efficient. But give it some years. I think that's a very, very slow magic. But I'm thinking there's sort of things I want to do with magic that what are the things in a fantasy novel that I actually fancy being able to? I'm just trying to think. I mean, what do I like the idea from Gandalf? I mean, Gandalf. Most of the things I admire about Gandalf got nothing to do with magic. I like the idea of being old and wise. I mean, I will inevitably be old at some point, but whether I'll be wise, I'm not sure. I mean, I've gone grey, so I've got that. Gandalf just sort of is just one of those guys you want on your team, isn't he? He's just, okay, well, Gandalf's here, then everything's going to be fine. He's kind of one of those reassuring types. So, I quite like the idea of being a reassuring type at some point in the future. But that's got nothing to do with magic. And in Lord of the Rings, the magic is very subtle. The elves have magic, but they don't even call it magic. They just call it their sort of craft. And other races kind of view it as magic. And I suppose the things I like the most about the elves are the fact that they can walk in the forests completely silently, and they can imbue physical objects with lights and stuff. But it's the elves can capture the light of a star and embed it in a crystal or something like that. Whereas of course humans can just switch on an LED. Boom, job done. So. If you're choosing old, you need the immortal to go with it. Yes, old, wise, smoking a pipe, making fireworks. I can do most of those. Projecting forwards, magic doesn't work as well because we have the scientific method and a better understanding of technical progression. Yeah, Gamma Bone, that's a good point. Have we inadvertently removed some of the I don't know, is romance the right word from that sort of thing by the fact that we can technologically do these things now? I mean, when Lord of the Rings was written, it's just prior to the Second World War, I think. The File of Gladriel. I mean, the File of Gladriel is dead easy to do. It's just it's a bottle of water with some LEDs suspended in it. All you need to do is figure out somewhere to put the batteries, right? So, ta-da, I've got one. And it's not quite so romantic, is it? Is that have you captured the star, Erendel? No, it's just a couple of double A's and an LED. Oh, right. So Freaky Deaky Dude is here as well. So old is nothing to look forward to. Everything either seizes up, shrivels or leaks. Haven't had that problem yet, but yes, I see where you're going. So and fantasy novels, and we've discussed this in the past, fantasy novels are sort of stuck in a weird sort of medieval world, aren't they? That for some reason nothing ever progresses. Because if you look at Lord of the Rings, I mean, you get that bit at the beginning where Elrond is saying to Gandalf, I was there, Gandalf, I was there when the strength of men failed. 2,000 years ago I was there. And then part of my head's going, 2,000 years? What's everyone been doing? Why are you still waving swords around and bows and arrows? Somebody must have invented gunpowder. And where's the technological progression? Why hasn't anybody gone, there must be a better way of doing this than just wandering around with swords? Fantasy worlds are often, they don't have a history that sort of makes sense in that they're sort of locked in a technological cul-de-sac which they don't seem to be able to get out of. Because you can't you can't stop using swords and horses and bows and arrows and siege warfare because you just can't. There seems to be some sort of unwritten law that you're not allowed to change anything. Technology, nobody can progress technologically in a fantasy realm. because it's suddenly, maybe then magic can't work because I don't know, maybe it was the Dark Ages and Lord of the Rings, but it was the Dark Ages for an awfully long time, thousands and thousands of years, rather than just the 500 that we had to put up with. And there was gunpowder in Lord of the Rings because they blew up Helm's Deep with it. Saruman had it, didn't he? Saruman invented gunpowder. There we go. And Lord of the Rings was kind of at the edge of technology in the early. Yeah, so there was that sort of feel, wasn't there? And Saruman did have that sort of technology thing going on with the Uruk-hai and the stuff there. Yeah, and Wintermute, Game of Thrones is worse. So the wall in Game of Thrones, I don't know much about the lore of the wall in Game of Thrones, but like you say, it's 10,000 years. What technology built that? Because that's one hell of an impressive wall. So somewhere in the past of Game of Thrones, the technology existed to build something that impressive, and yet still wandering around with swords and bows and arrows. What's going on there? So from that perspective, a lot of fantasy stories don't really make a lot of sense, and they're like I say, sort of trapped in that. It's this way because it's a fantasy novel, which I must admit I find a little bit. As I've got older, I find that a little bit less satisfying. I am quite happy to kind of give it up for the suspension of disbelief, because at the end of the day you're telling a story, right? And not everything necessarily has to. The aliens help them build it. And Abana the Wicked, Tolkien invented Saruman as a metaphor for the advance of technology and industrialisation. And I think there's an element of that. Now, Tolkien wasn't a big fan of allegories and stuff, but you can sort of see that in the sense of the Shire is basically the English, the idyllic English countryside, and Saruman goes and trashes it with his machines. You kind of get that impression from Lord of the Rings. You could argue the pyramids are built with lost skills and technology. Yes, that's a fair point. You could argue, Morgoth created orcs and dragons so he could do genetic engineering. Yes, because they were corrupted elves, weren't they, orcs? And I didn't know quite where the dragons came from. And I'd admire. I mean, at least with Tolkien, there's a. I mean, it's huge, isn't it? I mean, I can't critique Tolkien's mythology because it's enormous. In fact, there's probably more work done on the mythology of Middle Earth than there was actually writing the books. He did a fantastic amount, and and the books were his way of exploring his own land, I think, in some ways. And that's very impressive. The entire creation myth of Middle Earth and all that sort of stuff. So, and I suppose it depends what your aim is. If you just want to write a good old fashioned fantasy story, then just invent your land. It doesn't have to have a history. If you're just telling a story of good versus evil, plucky heroes take on the ultimate bad guy, and then everyone lives happily ever after. But it does kind of make you wonder sometimes. Okay, I'd like to come back to this land in maybe another 100 years. What's happened since the Dark Lord was overthrown? What was life like 100 years after the Dark Lord was overthrown, or maybe 100 years before the Dark Lord was overthrown? What was it like then? You're kind of interested in those sort of things. The Shire is Worcester and Oxfordshire. Okay, excellent. I suppose that sort of makes sense. It's kind of, there's a rolling landscape here, all those kind of things. And then Mordor is Birmingham. Love it. I suppose. There's that. At the time, I mean, what was the dark satanic mills they used to call them, all that sort of stuff. I suppose that makes sense. Of course, people knew about gunpowder. They have fireworks. And Asimov never explains why it was impossible to build a rope without the three laws, but uses the idea to great effect. So, I mean, you don't have to explain the background to your stories, because it depends what you're trying to tell a story about. If you've got a fantasy world, I always like to look around the edges of the fantasy world and see if there's anything there. And with Tolkien, of course, there is, because the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit are set in the third age of Middle Earth, and there's been a first and a second age of that realm, and lots of other stuff has happened, which the characters in the book do refer back to. I mean, Elrond in particular, I was there, Gandalf, all that sort of stuff, and that I think adds some gravitas to your story. If you've got a kind of historical event that isn't in the current book, but the characters refer back to, I think that's quite a powerful. Here comes the airplane again, or the helicopter. Mordor has Bovril. Can't stand Bovril or Marmite. That's horrible stuff. There we go. I don't know what that is. I think that is a helicopter. Somebody can run that through Google and find out what that is. It's a funny scene given that Gandalf is much older. Yeah, because Gandalf is a Mire, isn't he? So he's presumably been created, looked on. It doesn't seem that Gandalf always knows what he is, though. So I don't know if that was maybe a little bit of an afterthought. But there we go. I don't mind the metaphors of fantasy realms discussing the issues of today and all that kind of stuff. I think that's quite powerful. But it's interesting to note how much magical capability we actually do have in our current world. There's no Google sound search. What the hell was that sound? Yeah. That's quite interesting. I thought PC was about to laugh. Yeah, so apologies for that. I've got the window open because it's really, really quite humid and warm here in the UK at the moment, unseasonably so for September. Split Infinity by Piers Anstey had a fantasy world, a technological world in juxtaposition. So that is quite fun if that can be explored well. Quite a few science fiction authors have played around with that as well in terms of just mucking about with how technology and magic could kind of overlap. And Harry Potter does it in quite a funny sort of way, with pushing trolleys through the walls at King's Cross. Dark riders and helicopters, yeah. So, and how useful would a flying machine have been in Lord of the Rings? That would have been really good if they'd invented flight or something like that. Those fantasy novels do seem to be locked into that sort of, and they're quite often very European focused. I don't know if you've noticed that as well. So it's European siege warfare. The sort of stuff that we see in Lord of the Rings. With mostly pre-chemical weapons. Okay, so you don't have muskets or anything like that. So it's bows and arrows and trebuchets and siege towers and all that sort of stuff against big structural castles, built to defend against that sort of attack. Now that did happen in Europe. Okay, it did happen in Europe, but it didn't happen for very long. Okay, so we tend to, even over here, we've got a lot of castles in the UK, and if you go to Scotland, for example, you can't move for castles. Every time you go around a corner, there's a castle. They really seem to have built a lot of castles in Scotland. I was quite impressed when I was up there. It's like, there's another castle. So there was clearly a fair, there were a few hundred years where, fighting for castles in that sort of bows and arrows and trebuchets and siege towers and stuff did happen. That's genuinely a thing in history. But it wasn't for all that long because technology moved on. Okay, technology moved on. The cannon was invented. That was really the death knell for castles. And suddenly you had this ability to blast a castle to pieces from the outside, and so castle design very quickly changed to kind of accommodate the fact that people were shooting big cannonballs at them. Within a relatively short period of time, castles became totally and utterly obsolete. They were pointless because they were really, really expensive to build, and people could knock them down at whim. So it is. Castles are definitely a thing in history, but they have a very specific period in history in which they were effective. And they didn't last all that long because technology superseded them and made them pointless. Whereas in the fantasy realm, seem to be stuck. Castles are a thing because castles are cool, and siege warfare and bows and arrows just cool because we want to be able to ride around and shoot bows and arrows and stuff. And it's fantasy realms seem to be sort of stuck there, which I think is quite interesting a lot of the time. A lot of catapults, ballistas, trebuchet, swords, bows, all that sort of stuff. Close air support would have been very handy in the battle. So -2 Earth, you could have really done with a. I mean, even a bunch of biplanes from World War One would have been pretty useful in -2 Earth, wouldn't they? I would take a squadron of biplanes from World War One up against the Nazgul. I think that would have been a pretty reasonable fight. And magic is a selling point for future books. So that's a very good question. We could probably explore in a future stream. Is where do we go? I mean, we've talked about this in science fiction quite a bit, and I've commented on it. I've commented on it in my No Man's Sky stream actually quite a bit. That science fiction has gone very gritty and like ultra realistic in the last decade or so. So I'm thinking shows like the one that really kicked it off for me was the reimagined Battlestar Galactica, whereby you've got realistic maybe is not it's difficult to say whether it's realistic because it's in the far future, isn't it? But or in the past, or anyways, super technologically advanced. But science fiction became very gritty and down to earth and very sort of hard, I suppose, in the sort of sense of the camera angles and the types of issues it was addressing. And you see things like The Expanse. Again, I've got massive admiration for these shows because I think what they do is very, very good. But it's very gritty and it's very industrial and it's very quite depressing actually in some ways. I wonder if that's been a result of the sort of things that have happened to society in the last year. I mean, post 9/11 and the various wars that have been fought across the world. Those sort of things have sort of put our mindset, our creative mindsets into those spaces. So our science fiction is sort of reflecting that in some sort of way. And in some ways, some of the much more sort of kind of weird and wonderful science fiction that we had in maybe the 60s and the 70s has sort of been is just out of fashion. I mean, a lot of people, for example, if we took it in a gaming context, No Man's Sky and Elite Dangerous is a very good example. Elite Dangerous it's not realistic, but it's much more gritty and industrial in its feel than, let's say, No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky has got all sorts of weird and wacky stuff in it, which is just not realistic at all. And a lot of people complain it's cartoony in the way it presents itself. And yet, a lot of science fiction used to be like that, and that is a perfectly valid type of science fiction. But we've got very acclimatized to science fiction is gritty and material and kind of grungy nowadays. And that whether it's going to flow back the other way, it kind of feels like we almost need more optimistic stories from our science fiction writers. I don't know. And Battlestar Galactica was shot in that documentary style is both it was very new and quite edgy and quite exciting at the time, but now I'm getting a bit weary of it. I want to have a bit more, more upbeat science fiction. Some more fantastical concepts. Science fiction that's more Asimovian and Clarkian than it is this sort of, kind of today projected into the future with better technology, but mankind is still pretty much exactly the same kind of, I don't know if I'm explaining that very clearly, but maybe that sort of thing. So, there's this, we've got quite a narrow focus in a lot of the science fiction that we see here. Quite a lot of it's dystopian, quite a lot of it's industrial. Those sort of things. So I think the world of sci-fi figured out that gritty and real industrial sci-fi sold better than Star Trek clean and spirit. Maybe that's true. I think at the moment, and I don't know whether that will spin around, in time. I don't know. So Babylon 5 started with the gritty. So yeah, that's a good point. The shows became more serious, whereas I do miss some of that kind of, almost surreal science fiction that we used to have. Some of that kind of, what happens if we just become energy creatures and pervade the universe type, that sort of stuff can't happen in The Expanse, Elite Dangerous, Battlestar Galactica, we'll just transmogrify ourselves and become energy beings, that sort of thing, and that kind of what happens to us in a million years time of evolution. What does humanity become? Those sort of science fiction explorations aren't there in the kind of film and stuff. And flipping it back to the fantasy side of things, so we Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, very big things. So they've kind of been done. So we've done the kind of epic fantasy, Lord of the Ringsy sort of stuff, and there's more coming. Obviously, there's going to be what are they going to call the Silmarillion stuff that's coming next year. So I will watch that and I will love it. But I know it's going to be. I mean, it'd be interesting to see if they do something slightly different with it compared to the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, because those are relatively old now, aren't they? They're like 10 and 20 years old. So the Silmarillion type stuff. What are they going to do a different take on it? Because it looks at the moment, from the single picture that we've got of that, it looks very Tolkien-esque, which is a good thing really, because kind of that's what we're expecting to see. Are they going to do anything different with it? I don't know. And then you got on the opposite side, you've got Harry Potter with the sort of formulaic magic, I suppose, is a bit, where you can cast a spell and zap. That's been done a lot of. With the straining with the hands and all that sort of stuff. And then there's loads and loads of other fantasy of varying quality that kind of plays around on that sort of thing. But it's almost like some of that stuff hasn't. There's other versions of these sort of things, and I think there's a lot of good books, but they haven't made it necessarily to the screen. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. George Orwell wrote pretty dark, distressing sci-fi. Yes, that's very true. Yes, 1670s were more hopeful and such. The authors and artists start with a more positive standpoint. I think there's something very much in that, Abana. I think that the environment that you're in is very the art follows it, and our art has been very dystopian and kind of gritty and not very nice in what's reflecting, and I don't see that changing, because I mean if you cast around the world today, the vibe is the issues that society is wrestling with today. I mean the ones that come back time and time again are gender identity and refugee issues, economic uncertainty, and the differences between different age groups, so intergenerational conflict. All of those are things that we are as a society wrestling with today. And I think those issues are going to be the sort of stuff that's reflected in our science fiction and fantasy as we go forward. So I don't expect to see very much kind of fluffy, optimistic sci-fi coming out. I just don't think we're there. I think we could probably do with it. So maybe there's a market for it, just to kind of cheer people up. But I think the issues and stuff, the issues that I've just sort of mentioned are going to be sort of the things that is going to be reflected in a lot of science fiction and fantasy, which in some ways I'm not happy about, because I like to be, science fiction and fantasy for me is I don't mind it exploring social issues and stuff like that. And Star Trek was very good at that. But in sometimes I much prefer just to go the sort of Star Wars mentality. Let's just go somewhere else. Okay, let's just go somewhere else that's away from all the problems that we're trying to wrestle with here on the Earth today, and just transport me somewhere else that's different and interesting and nice. And I can take my brain off the hook for a couple of hours and just be somewhere else. And I reflect that in my own writing. Personally, I don't try to basically pick an issue of the day and go, right, I'm going to turn that into a sci-fi novel. I don't like that. I try with my own novels to basically say, what I want to do for my readers is I just want to take them away from wherever they are, doing whatever they're doing, and give them some escapism. That's my aim. But not all writers are the same. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Question, does fantasy have to have magic in it? No, I don't think it does. I think a fantasy, it quite often will, but I don't think it has to. So no, I don't think so. Magic in Game of Thrones was minimal. In fact, to be honest, magic in Lord of the Rings isn't all that common most of the time. Arthurian stories without magic and fantasy. So I would say an Arthurian story was magic. There's a sort of magical undertone to the Arthurian legends, but there's not a great deal of magic kind of going on in the sense of stuff that's being manifested. But Merlin's a wizard, but and he does things, but he's more kind of influencing events. He's more like a sort of a magister, isn't he, more than a magician in some ways. You don't have to have magic in a fantasy novel now. Animal Farm was fantasy but doesn't really have magic. Yeah, I suppose Animal Farm is a fantasy, and the definition of fantasy is very, very wide reaching. Or if Merlin was just a wise elder. Well, a lot of people have written him that way. Arthurian legends. Was Merlin a wizard or was he just a clever dude? Who's just wise and insightful. Sometimes that's enough as your kind of wizardy chap. Very much they did it with Doctor Who lately. So Doctor Who, I've there's a couple of episodes I've watched and I've gone, really? Okay, the subtext in this episode is so obvious, it's excruciating to watch. I get that there's a responsibility to talk about social issues in our entertainment. I wrestle with that one a lot because I don't like being preached at. It really irritates me. But I get that sometimes it's necessary, But I personally don't like doing it. I don't do it myself. At least I don't consciously do it myself. Those sort of things. That one I find very difficult because, if you can't reach people one way, you're going to try and reach them another way. And entertainment is a way of reaching people, obviously, and teaching them moral lessons and stuff. And I kind of get that. But on the flip side, I really don't like it either. The Chronicles of Thomas Covenant the Unbeliever was a refusal to use magic. Okay, so you can do some clever stuff like that, and I quite like when the magic is accidental or it's a lost gift, or those sort of things. So I suppose the question, the thing is, as I bring the stream to a close, is where can we go with these things? What else? Can we do new and original things with science fiction and fantasy? It's hard. I don't think it's impossible. I think it's hard to be original. And it's probably easier to be original in science fiction than it is in fantasy, I would have thought. But it depends on what you're going to do. So I know. I suppose maybe that's just me. I come up with more ideas in the sci-fi realm than I do with the fantasy one. And Krilikov says Doctor Who blended dark and gritty with fantastical like never. See, I must admit, I look back on Doctor Who in my childhood with quite a lot of fondness, because there was quite a lot of moments where I was hiding behind the sofa with the pillow. God. Yeah, I do remember that. And Asimov was good at working social issues into his fiction. Yeah, I suppose that's true as well. So I just don't like it being rammed down my throat. Here's what you're supposed to think as an enlightened person of this era, and if you don't, you're clearly a monster. It's like, really? Can I not make up my own opinion? So Ewan says, I vaguely remember having a book read to me where a child was near Merlin and overheard him complaining about his fluorescent bulbs failing again. Okay, interesting. Chris says, I'm currently planning a fantasy novel, I hope, and currently there's no intention to put anything magic in it, but it's not set in stone. Yeah, so and I played around with that with Shadebird. I initially thought, well, maybe I'll just make it a straight fantasy novel and just give magic powers to people. And I thought, no, that seems to be a bit of a cop-out. I don't want to just have magic, so I settled on the science fiction underpinnings and didn't make it magic. And I think if I write my own fantasy novel, let's say I write a high fantasy novel in the style of Lord of the Rings, which I probably wouldn't do, but if I did, I'd want the magic system in it to have some consequences. If you use a lot of magic, then it does something to you, it burns you out maybe, or it exhausts you, or it does something to the environment or something like that. So there's a cost to using magic. I would do something like that, but that's just me. But I do look at the sort of stuff that we get in terms of the science fiction and the fantasy stuff that's presented, and it's interesting to see how much a reflection of current stuff it is, or at least current stuff from a few years back, obviously when the thing was being written. It's interesting to see the sort of ideas that come through. Weeping Angels in Doctor Who had me by. That was a brilliant episode. I have to be honest, I think that Weeping Angels episode is probably the definitive Doctor Who episode for me. I was when I watched that, and who's that by? Is that who wrote that one? Is it Moffat? Is it Moffat? I think it's Moffat. I remember thinking when I watched that, it was genuinely quite scary, which is in a good sort of way. In a Doctor Who sort of way, and I got to the end of the episode and thought, "Damn, that was a brilliant piece of writing," it was a really, really good episode. The way that they were pulling off the wallpaper and the messages were being revealed and the time travel bit of that, I thought it was very, very good. It was Moffat, and I remember thinking, "Damn, that guy can write." And then I watched some of his later stuff, and it was awful. And I thought, this guy obviously has genius moments, but he's not very consistent. I think consistency is something that readers appreciate, or watchers appreciate as well. I hope, and you tell me if I've succeeded or not, but I hope if you buy a Dru-ids book, you're A, guaranteed a certain level of quality, and B, a certain type of story that you're going to be able to go, I'm going to enjoy this consistently because I know Dru-ids has written it, whereas Stephen Moffat, isn't it? I thought the Weeping Angels Blink episode was brilliant, and then I remember thinking, oh great, it's Stephen Moffat again, this is going to be an excellent episode. I can't remember what it was, and I remember thinking it was dreadful. It was like, what happened? He wasn't consistently good. I think that was the problem. So there's some there is some genius there, but it wasn't consistent, which bothered me a bit. Don't do magic, kids, stay in school. Carbon neutral wizards. Rob's 261. I thoroughly enjoyed sharing with Blue through the last book and a couple of those. Excellent. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. That's good. Right, my friends. It's time. It's time once more to end the waffle. And by the way, if you want me to cover particular topics, I realise I usually just come up with a topic on my own, but if you want to, chuck in topics for the stream, then do let me know. I'm quite happy to pick up on and wing with your suggestions as well. So if you've got topics that you'd like me to talk about, and whether that's just a science fiction or fantasy topic, or whether it's stuff about writing, or whether it's stuff about anything particular, in the overall kind of swing of writing and putting books together and all that stuff, then they do, because it's good fun to sort of riff on different things, and you can see that works quite well with the waffling anyway. All those sort of things. But it's time once again to bring the evening to a conclusion, I'm afraid. So thank you very much for coming. I'm afraid, and I have apologies to make. I miscalculated. This Thursday I won't be here. My wife and I have an unusual event in the sense that we've actually got 2 days off. So my Thursday stream won't be running. So apologies for that. Though No Man's Sky will have to wait a week. But I should be back on Saturday with my Wing Commander stream. So so apologies that the Thursday stream won't be taking place, because I shall be enjoying a nice dinner out with my wife, which is not something that we often get a chance to do. So I'm not turning that one down. So apologies for that. Need to look at the unbalance of energy in sci-fi as one. So we can definitely cover topics. If you've got topics, maybe we'll chuck them in and we'll have a bit of a free-for-all. I'll just make a note of topics next week, and we'll have a bit of a brainstorm. That'd be quite good. So thank you very much. You take care of yourself, my friends. And he's just brought some waffles especially. We'll keep them, they're lovely. But otherwise I will see you on Saturday, so apologies for the Thursday not being around, but we will be back. Occasionally those things crop up. Take care, my friends. Right on, as ever, right on. Be good. Get her to play No Man's Sky, then you can eat dinner in front of the PC. I think that loses some romance. I can try it. I probably won't be alive to report the results, I'm afraid. Anyway, take care, my friends. Be good. See you soon. and we will be back on Saturday. Take care. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. See you soon.